Meher Baba ki jai.
You all know how Baba did phases of his work throughout his life. It was kind of a critical path. He would often complete one phase of his work before he began another. And though there might be some overlapping, it was kind of critical that certain things were done in sequence. So he did much of this early work for his circle in the earlier days of his life. As a master, Meher Baba's main responsibility was to give God realization to his circle members. Most of that work was done at the beginning of his life's mission, though the manifestation of that work began to happen towards the end of his life and will continue to happen throughout the coming centuries until the next Advent, when it will be complete. This is how Baba explained it would be. Another phase of Baba's work through his life was his many travels. Starting in 1924, really, he made his first trip to Iran in 1924. There were two subsequent trips to Iran in 1929 and 1931. He began to travel around the world then in 1931. Made 10 trips abroad in the 1930s. 6 trips to America were included in those 10. He would spend a certain amount of time in different places. In 1931 and 32, for an example, he spent a few weeks at Harmon-on-Hudson, north of New York City, meeting people there. In 1937, he spent 82 days in France, bringing, for the first time, some of his close women, mandali, to France. 82 days before World War II. He traveled again out of the Indian subcontinent, beginning in 1952 after the New Life. That's when he spent, to start with, a month here, when he visited the center for the first time, traveled to Prague, Oklahoma, had the car collision, spent 12 days in Prague, returned here, and spent another month recuperating at Elizabeth's home, Yupan Dunes, south of here. He returned to the center in 1956, spent only 6 days then, returned again in 58. But all of these trips here to the center had a great impact, and we can see it is not necessarily the amount of time he spent here, but he gave the impact of his presence, as he referred to his home in the West. This is the place. And we still tangibly feel his loving presence here. It's here. All of this is something that is much more than the time he spent in his particular lifetime, though we have to go by what he has claimed. These are the few places in the world that he has declared are his centers. Avatar's abode in Australia, and this place as his home in the West, outside of India. He was to many other places. Italy, Assisi was very important to him. So much time in England, Switzerland. But mostly then, these don't add up to but about not a year outside of India. All that time was spent working in India. And most of that time was spent at Meherabad and then Meherabad. During those trips in 1950, one of the important disciples that accompanied Baba was Adi Keirani. After Baba dropped his body, Adi came here again, 4 times in the 1970s to stay on the center and meet people. Adi Keirani's mother was Gulmai. Baba referred to her as his own spiritual mother. Adi's father was Kaikushu Sarosh Irani, who was given the honorary title Konsaheb, so we refer to him as Konsaheb Kaikushu because there are many other Kaikushus in Baba's history, many. Adi's elder brother, Rustam, was married to Mera's elder sister, Freni, in 1923 in Ahmednagar, and that is when Baba came there to attend the wedding. And it was during that period of a few weeks that Baba first came to the place on his own that came to be Meherabad. He spent only 3 weeks there in that month of May, 1923. He went away, came again shortly, but spent another 3.5 weeks in seclusion in the post office building at this place, which was a POW camp during World War I. This property was the property that was owned by Kansep Kaikushu and Gulmai. And Gulmai wished that Baba would take it and use it for his personal work, which he did. So he spent about 3.5 weeks in December 1923 in secret seclusion in this building here, the post office. This is a map of Lower Meherabad during 1924. You all won't be able to make out some of the print here and some of my scribbling, so I'm going to point some things out as we go along. But they stayed there in the post office. The main room of the post office was about 18 feet by 30 feet, and then there was a larger veranda to the east and the south where that was covered, where they would spend much of their time during the day, especially in the hot months. While they were in Bombay after that, in 1924, Gilori Shah, the saint, dropped his body on January 16, 1924, and his body was buried as per his wish and as per Baba's affirmation to it, here, a site that he had picked out the previous year. In February 1924 and into March 1924, Baba, with 8 of his men, made his first short trip to Iran. And they returned in March, traveled some through North India to the border of Nepal, visited Maghar, where the tomb shrine of Kabir, the perfect master Kabir, is. A few days later, Baba sent the remaining mandali who were with him back to their homes and traveled alone in that area for about a week. This is the only time in his life as Meher Baba that he was alone without any of his mandali. He returned at the beginning of the last week of March, and at Ahmednagar informed Adi that he wanted the mandali to be beckoned back to Meherabad, where they would begin a period of labor and a long stay. He had warned the mandali from previous time at the first ashram, Manzalimim in Bombay, that he would be soon going to a place in the country where anybody who wanted to stay with him would have to be ready to pursue the life of hard work. And so they were all called and began. They stayed in the post office building at that time, and their first work at that time was to clear rubble that was left from the POW camp of World War I in this area, mostly. There was some here, but mostly it was in this area. A lot of that rubble was placed in lower areas and the grounds were leveled. This is what they did for some days. And then in early April, for about 10 days in April, they began to work on a hut for Baba. He wanted it here about 40 yards off the road, right about here. That little hut is only less than 7 feet wide inside by about 8 feet long. There was a short window on each side and the door is right here. The windows are very short and they couldn't make sense of it at the time, but there's a purpose for that which becomes clearer later. The men worked as laborers. The first disciples from Arangaon in this direction was an old carpenter, and he did the carpentry work, and there was a mason from Ahmednagar who was hired. The mandali worked as laborers, and Baba himself worked with the men, although during this phase of his life, Baba was usually fasting. The purpose was that, as he indicated occasionally, was for the work for his circle. So even though Baba was on his meager diet, he also worked along with all of the mandali as laborers. He wanted to get this thing done as quickly as possible. The actual construction of this hut was done in about 10 days during early April.
What was the makeup?
The hut itself has rock walls, which are about 16 inches thick. It had a veranda that surrounded all sides, and they were made of teakwood poles. And there was a Mangalore, a clay tile roof on all of this. The ceiling of the building was quite high, which keeps it cooler in the summer. And there were little ventilator holes that were also made in the top of this hut to make it comfortable for Baba at any time of the year.
You said later that that building was second only to the Samadhi.
There you're digressing, Will. A typical routine day. The mandali would get up at 5 a.m. And during that time, Baba asked the men to pray in the religion that they were accustomed to for 2 hours. It wasn't that Baba encouraged religious practices, but rather that he used any of their lingering religious impressions of the men for his spiritual work for them and for anybody they were connected to. This is what he did during those early years. You find also that history at Manzalimim. In these early years, we will see that Baba gradually allows the mandali to go through their natures, uses all of that, and gradually they see, obviously, this is bogus. It was only him. But he made use of all of that. Breakfast was at 7 a.m. Breakfast was bhakri, unleavened millet bread, and some milkless weak tea. That Irani weak tea. That's what they had. As much as they wanted, but they didn't waste sugar much. And then after breakfast, they would get to the day's work. But because it's summer in April there, by noon, be getting quite hot. So they would stop. And then after a bath, washing clothes, they would have, again, more bhakri, but this time with a vegetable. Bhakri with a vegetable. And then more of the same weak tea. And a little rest. From 3 to 4:30 for an hour and a half, they would repeat an early version of the 7 names of God. Khoda, Paramatma, Allah, Ahura Mazd, Ram, Yazdanhu. This is the first that we hear of the 7 names of God. There was also a poem that Bob had written at Manzalimim, The Horizon of Love. Somebody would recite that poem.
Do you have it?
I don't have it, and I wouldn't read it at this time, but let me give you a very quick summary of the theme. That is the responsibility of Zoroaster to work for the whole world, and how difficult it is for the disciples of the Master to follow this path properly. And so then at 4:30, they go back to their respective work for a while, till 6 o'clock, when they would break. Dinner was then, more vegetable with bhakri. But Baba told the men, this is a period of hard work. It would be wise for you to supplement your diet with 3 or 4 almonds a day. Build up your strength. Then, the fun part of the day for them, after dinner, say 7 o'clock, Baba would sing, play dholak, the double drum. Adi would play sitar. This was the very old-fashioned system of Indian music. Before the harmonium, it was a British influence, came. Sitar and a drum. So in that old style, Baba would play and sing, and Adi would accompany him on sitar. And then Baba would give a discourse. That's when Baba would give discourses by speaking. And then they would retire at 10 o'clock to start again at 5 the next morning. So they were young men, they were allowed to sleep 7 hours. And during those early years, we mentioned, Baba allowed the Hindus, they had the most strict habits. He allowed the Hindus to keep their separate kitchens still and have their separate food and do all of that. Gradually, that was eliminated by the end of the first long stay. Baba very patiently did all of this, because in the act of allowing this, things came up which showed them the shortcomings of their notions, which in the end they were so sick of that they were happy to abandon. But he had to let them do it naturally so they would get real freedom of all that. But in allowing the Hindus to have their religious freedoms, they like to celebrate their holidays and all that, it sometimes irked the mandali of the other faiths. And Baba also liked that. Yes. So all of that was in the mix. But he would very masterfully make them aware of all this before wiping out all those sanskars. Lord Ram's birthday was celebrated, for example, on April 13th. It was the first time, you've seen those cloth coverings. So a cloth covering was set up here, just in front of the jopti. And a singer came, a bhajan singer came, recited some stories about Ram. The next day, the first Bhandara happened at Meherabad, which is a feeding of the poor. This is something that Baba liked to do from time to time. So about 1,000 people were fed there the next day in front of the jopti. This is the first time that that happened. That evening, Baba made the statement, "Once I have settled here, the atmosphere of this place will be greatly heightened spiritually and materially. I have a great mission to perform in my life for the benefit of humanity, the outcome of which will be observed in the near future." Of course, near to the Ancient One is a very relevant statement. Near future. At a meeting the following day, Baba named this hut the Jopti. That's when it got its name. On the 16th, the men began the work of refurbishing the bathroom building. Over here, that was one of the 4 original buildings: post office, bathing room, bathroom building, and the mess quarters here, plus the tank up on the hill that is out of the picture there. It was one of the main buildings that was left there, and Baba wanted to refurbish that building. During the work of that building, Padri and Ramjoo were chatting. Baba had a stick in his hand. From a distance he threw that, which whizzed past Padri's head here and caught their attention. Later on, Padri didn't say anything, but he showed Baba his hands, which were full of blisters. And Baba's remark was, "You people swear you will give up your lives, your very lives for me, but a few blisters make you whimper and cry? This is not even the beginning of the process of giving up your life. It is a sin to complain in this path, where for years on end you must be cut to pieces, remaining quiet and wounded until you're ready to give up the ghost. So seal your lips and never complain, and allow me to kill you slowly, inch by inch. This is bravery, not in complaining about your blisters."
That's how Padre told it to you. It sounded like Padre.
I'm trying to give you the impression of Padre. Now, the average person would think, maybe it's a little harsh. This isn't a life for me. But if you knew Padre, this to him was poetry. However, his hands were bad, so he was sent to Ahmednagar to recuperate at a clinic there. And in the meantime, the problem of management of Meherabad was there. Padre was the manager. So Ramjoo was made the manager in his place, but the next day Ramjoo got a fever. And so gradually he became unable to do the work. And the mandali weren't very empathetic about all that, and Baba was irritated. So Baba got fed up and said, that's it. I'm going to leave this place. I'll take Nervous, and only Nervous and I will go away from you. Do whatever you like. And the mandali pleaded with him. If the responsibility is not taken, Baba says, I'm leaving. In the meantime, Padre came back. There was some meeting. Padre back at Meherabad agreed to take the management of labor, but not the household, not the responsibility of cooking and keeping the place in order. They were staying in the post office, and most of the work was here. This is actually like 100 yards. So the back and forth was too much. And so Padre said, I'll take this, but this is impractical. So there was more discussion, argument, and finally Gustaji agreed to take the management of the cooking and all that. So that was settled. The hard work continued in the summer, in the hot sun, in the heat. And on top of that, Baba took every opportunity to scold them, to make them realize, you're not there. You're not attentive enough. Work hard. Now, Padre, Adi, they were 20 years old. This is the life of discipline and hardship that they were going through. Got to be made for it. He was giving them a crash course in forbearance and tolerance. Gustaji was in charge of the stores. The stores were up here, and he was the one who would dole out necessities to people if they were required. Barso, that was his nickname, was also a Muslim disciple of Baba's from the early days. He wanted a new prayer rug, and Gustaji wouldn't allow the expenditure. So Barso and Gustaji went through this thing. One day, Barso got so angry that he started abusing Gustaji. To the early mandali, Gustaji was known as something. Baba had made a statement a few years previous. To bow down to Gustaji is the same as bowing down to me. This is how unique Gustaji was. So, you know, he was one of the early people who died, and in the later years, very few people knew about him, and he was so unassuming and jovial that people didn't really know. But he was most important to Baba in those early days. He was also the first circle member who in Baba's lifetime, as he said would happen, received God realization upon it. So Gustaji and Barso were having this argument. Barso got angry and started abusing Gustaji verbally. It was a big scene that evening. Baba asked Barso whether his anger towards Gustaji had subsided. Barso admitted it hadn't. And this gave Baba the opportunity to give them a good pep talk about self-control. In the evening, now, to make them practice controlling anger, he gave them these two orders. Each morning, every member of the mandali will salute every other member of the mandali and say, "You are my brother." Bow down and touch their feet. And if at any time during the day, 24 hours a day, any words were spoken bitterly to any of one of the other companions, Baba should immediately be informed, and he personally would go to the offender and bow down to him and touch his feet. How many of us could have done such a thing? Barso said, the first rule is against the Shariat of Islam. I wouldn't be able to follow this. Baba said, I'm not asking you to bow down and lay your head on anybody's feet, simply touch their feet. No, I think even touching the feet is against the Shariat. I can't do that. So Baba allowed Barso to shake hands with the other men. Okay, you just shake hands with them and say the same. You don't have to touch their feet. And he turned to Ramjoo and said, "You're Muslim. What do you think? Doesn't this disturb the Shariat?" Ramjoo said, "I don't find any offense to Shariat in the first order, but I will never allow you to bow down and touch my feet." And Padre and Nervous agreed, Baba, we can't do that. We can't agree to that second order. Baba explained to Padre Nervous, this is my order. Aren't you here to obey? And they agreed. But Ramjoo couldn't let that go, and Baba pulled him aside and said, look here, you're doing the same thing that Barsuk did. Why don't you accept my wish on principle and just carry it out without any hesitation? What Sharia can exceed my wish? My wish is religion and my wish is Sharia, and anyone who fulfills my wish fulfills the tenets of his religion. What more is there than that? To always be mindful of my wish, regardless of anything else. But Ramjoo protested, but Baba, I would not like it if you touch my feet. And Baba said, you're here to tell me about your likes and dislikes? You should do whatever I like. If you don't follow my wish, how can you revere me? You say you revere me. You cannot be a slave to your own wish and revere me at the same time. And Ramjoo pleaded, but it would break my heart, Baba, if you touch my feet. Baba said, well, maybe it would break my heart if I can't touch your feet. And Ramjoo had nothing more to say. What did he say? But point was made. Baba said, okay, I free you from the second order. Now forget about it. The next few days, April 23rd, there was a discussion. The Mandali were thinking, no, now that Baba has a real place of residence here, the Jogdi, it's a tradition, there should be a flag that marks the spot. The master is here. Should be a flag. And Hindu said, yes, yes, that's what we want, and it should be our orange flag. As we all know, when the Guru is there, the orange flag is there. And of course, Ramjoo said, orange is a Hindu color, but green is the better color. And the Hindus protested, that is Mohammedan color. And the Zoroastrians said, we don't like any of those colors. And Baba settled the issue by saying, here's the way it should be. There should be a flag of 7 colors. The bottom color is red, and the top is sky blue. Later, he explained what the meaning of that was, but he said, have 7 colors, the bottom red, the top sky blue, and for the other 5, you argue amongst yourselves. So that was done that day, and Dina Talati, she was the mother-in-law of Sridhar Kalkar, the last chairman of the trust. She sewed the flag that day, and that evening, for the first time, the flag was hoisted on a flagpole in front of the Jogdi envelope. That's the history of Baba's flag in one day. Being very frank by nature, one day, Padri spoke a bit rudely to one of the other men during lunch. Baba came to hear of it, and as per the order, Baba came there and bowed down to Padri's feet. Nervous was standing just nearby, and just to tease Nervous, Baba quickly leaned over and touched her. But Nervous took this very seriously, and he began to weep. And he said, I can't do this. I'm going to have to leave Meherabad. Baba said, what's wrong? I was just kidding with you. Why did you take this so seriously? But Nervous was adamant about leaving. You could do anything like this at any time. How can I? So Baba said, you're exempted from the second rule. Now forget about it. But he was adamant about leaving. And though he was willing to follow all of Baba's orders, he thought, I have to leave. So Baba permitted Nervous to leave and offered him fare. You got to have some money to travel. These men gave everything. They had nothing personally like that. But Nervous remembered that just the week before, Baba had become very irritated because one of the Hindu Mandali asked Baba for some money to go and visit his mother in Pune. So there was a rule passed, don't do this, disrupting everything here. So Nervous didn't accept any money from Baba. Baba said, how are you going to travel without any money? And in tears, Nervous said, well, I have these gold buttons here. Now, some of you may remember the old-fashioned buttons were sewed onto a strap. And both sides of the shirt had buttonholes, so you'd put the strap of buttons inside, and each button hole would go through a button. Baba said, "Gold? Oh, give me the button." Baba took the buttons. There's Nervous in his shirt with no buttons. "You really want to go? You can leave under 2 conditions. 1, you must beg for your food. And 2, no stealing and no borrowing." "You still willing to go?" "Yes, I have to go." He starts wandering away. As he's leaving now, Baba says, "And wherever you go, I will follow." And yes, Nervous thinking, yes, philosophical, yes, he's everywhere. He's walking away. He's walking away, and after a little distance, he sees Baba's right behind him. So he starts walking faster. Baba's still there. So he starts running as fast as he can, and Baba's right next to him. So he laughs, sees the humor of the situation, and he returns with Baba. Back at Meherabad, after Nervous has calmed down, Baba asks him, "Why did you take this so seriously? Why did you become so upset? Why were you so dramatic?" Nervous said, "Baba, you touched my feet and I didn't do anything wrong." Baba said, "I did this because of some fault in you. Had I not touched your feet, how could you or others have known that you had shortcomings? Had there been no offense, you could have remained quiet and considered it to be my wish. Although you have no faults, you have faults. You are not faultless. Your fault is you think you have no faults. But I had to show you that it was not so." And Baba addressed all the men. "Although you are faultless, still you are at fault. But I will free all of you from your weaknesses. So always listen to me and remember to carry out whatever I say." Baba had a wish during that time. He wanted 3 white animals. He wanted a dog, an ox, and a horse. Mera heard of this. She was in Pune at the time with her mother, Daulat Mai. And so Mera wanted Baba to take her white horse. So the horse was sent to Meherabad with Rustam. Baba received that horse, and it was kept way over here at the mess quarters building on that northeast corner. One day Baba went there, put some red vermilion on the horse's head, and sat upon that horse for a few minutes. That is the only time in his life where he ever sat upon a horse. And when the men saw this, they realized that there was something very special about Mera. This was a big hint to them.
What about that picture of Baba on that white donkey?
That's a donkey.
I know.
Champa.
Oh, you're making that difference.
A donkey is different than a horse. A few times Baba sat on a donkey. I digress for a minute. They used to have, during the first long stay, these games here to the east of the mess court. And they had a very humorous donkey race there one day. They had all different types of games and fun things they did. During the rest of the month of April, there were flagstone verandas that were built around the Jopri. And there were pits for shrubs. Chameli is a fragrant flower. There were pits, 3 on each side, I believe, dug beside the Jopri here. And there was a bathroom built for Baba right here behind the Jopri on the veranda surrounding the building. That bath water of Baba's watered a little banyan cut that was put there. This whole area was a garden through the years. Now only one thing remains from that garden, that is that giant banyan tree that still grows, that was initially watered by Baba's bath water. Everything else has died off. But that tree now is this big, covers this whole area. At the end of April, there was an Irani disciple named Ardashir who came to visit Baba, and he brought some nice fruits. People would come to visit Baba, they would bring nice things, and they would be kept in the store if they weren't perishable, but fruits would be distributed to people, and this is the one time the mandali got to eat something besides a vegetable and bakri. So Ardeshir brought some nice fruits, and Baba said, very nice, reminds me of what we saw when we visited Iran. Baba getting this out of him. Do you think we could do such a thing? Yes, Baba. The man was a bit of a tyrant. We could have a nice orchard here and we would be self-sufficient. But these young men, they would have to work harder. Baba didn't care so much about the orchard, but he loved this concept of the men will have to work harder. You're right. You are now Director of Agriculture. So the men were put to work here. After the first day, they were totally exhausted, so Baba had to give them a total day off. And at that time, Ramjoo wrote in his diary, I don't know how many of the mandali will stay alive just to finish this orchard project, let alone to ever taste the fruits of it. Gulmai wanted Baba to wear something that would distinguish him from the rest of the group. There's a nice photograph of Baba during that period. It was actually taken in 1923, where you can see what Baba wore in those early years. White kurta, long shirt, and pants, which is what most of the rest of them wore. Simple clothes. On April 30th, Gulmai brought the first long sadra for Baba to wear. Those early sadras had a lot more material. They were a bit baggy, and so for Baba's wish, Gulmai began making these with less material, and Baba was happy with that. But this is the day when that verse came. While they were having this discussion, two Zoroastrian men came from Ahmednagar. Cars would park around here. Right here, came out and approached Baba, striding confidently. And Bar Soap was the attendant, said, please remove your shoes when you go near Baba. Disregarded that. One of the Zoroastrian men says to Baba, why do you go around naked like this? What are you doing here? Baba calmly looked at him and pointed. Baba had shorts under his pants. And the guy's doing this, and Baba says, why do you wear a suit and hat? Did Zoroaster, the prophet, wear clothes like this? Yes, he did. And the man kept on making these imputed remarks. What yoga do you do? Baba said, labor yoga. We do labor yoga, which is where the term Gamela yoga came from. Gamela is a steel bowl, and all the laborers in India who have to do hard work carry material in these bowls on their heads to throw dirt, rock. So that's how the term Gamela yoga came. Baba's answer to this man, labor yoga. And he continued with, why do you go around naked? Making other statements. Baba calmly and tactfully disarmed all of the man's illogical arguments. There was another man with him. Both of them became frustrated because they couldn't get Baba angry. So they started shouting abuses at him. You're a fraud, you charlatan, you're cheating people, and you're this and you're that. Now, Adi, those of you who knew him, you know he was a lion. He got fed up, and in his Adi Kairani voice said, get out at once! Get out! So these two men were leaving. They knew his concept, Kaikushu's son. They're leaving. Baba tells Adi, why did you speak to them that way? You go down, bow down to him, and beg his forgiveness. Adi used to tell the story to us occasionally. I don't know if you remember it, but he said how irritated he was, but he had to obey. The men were on the way back. The car was parked there. The man sat in his car. Adi went up to him. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. I yelled and bent down and touched his feet. And Adi used to make that voice. And that man, he was just there. Ah. But anyway, the impact of it was that they were actually somewhat embarrassed that here was Concept Kaikushu's son who by the order of his master would do this. This were on the man's mind. A few days later, he came to Meherabad alone and asked Baba's forgiveness for his impudence. And we know, according to the diaries of future years, that occasionally he would come to Meherabad. Of course, the majority of the visitors who came to Meherabad came out of respect. And when Baba first came in late March, they were staying there at the post office, and there were a couple of poor Arangown boys, curious looking there. Baba called them, "Boys, come here." They were so scared. They started crying and shaking. "No, we're in trouble. He's going to beat us." But Baba said, "Come here, boys." And he sat with them beneath this tree in the shade. "What are your names? What do you do all day?" Became friendly. "Gustaji, bring them snack." Gustaji brought something and Baba gave them. And he talked to them a little while. He said, "Bring other boys." So gradually then, more of the kids would come. And he started teaching them things. Nursery rhymes, little simple tukaram, bhajans. He got them to sing. He loved hearing their squeaky, bad voices. That work was turned over to Arjun Supikar, who during the following year, first long stay, became, this is an illiterate man, but a very dedicated disciple of Baba's. Gradually, he became Baba's director of education. He was in charge of the singing of the boys, and gradually they got better and better. And then by early May, their nightly program became listening to these boys sing. Because that's what Baba liked. This work for the orchard was all here. If you've been to Meherabad and seen where the Pilgrim Center is, the Pilgrim Center would be about here. And that whole area up to where the buses come in, that road there, was the orchard. This area was then all fenced in to protect it from animals. There was also a barbed wire fence around the Jopri garden at that time. And that came to about here, I would say, right across. The gate for the Jopri garden was right here, directly in front of the Jopri at that point in the fence. Baba was planning to fast in seclusion there at the Jopri. So to prepare for this work, he broke from his usual habit of a very meager diet and started eating 3 meals a day for a couple of days. The mandali realized he's very serious. And he's trying to build up his strength for this fast, however long it may be. Baba entered seclusion then on May 7th, but it was different now. He was also keeping silence for the first time. So he went into seclusion on the 7th, keeping silence. But after one day, the following evening, Baba spoke to the men outside and said he'd become very weak. It had nothing to do with fasting. He said it was the burden of the work. It was as if now that Meher Baba was in one place, had his seat, and tackled this burden of his universal work for the first time, the effort required to make the inertia, the great spiritual inertia, effect was tremendous. To come to terms with that, it was a great effort. He stopped keeping silence but continued fasting and stayed in seclusion there. When he was silent for that first time, they saw the purpose for the window, which was he would communicate by writing, and one of the mandali, who was the attendant, would stay outside the window, the low window. So if Baba wanted to knock, and the note would be right there, and the attendant could get the note without seeing Baba. That was the intention when he was doing seclusion work. More important, the following year, the mandali continued work in the orchard. They had no animals, no beasts of burden, so they had to, you've heard the stories, they had to pull the carts and do all this work themselves. Work like animals. It was hard, and they would find it difficult to get along and do the work. Very trying conditions. And due to the continued ill feeling between some of the mandali, Baba summoned all of them to the Jopti on the 12th. Berated them, criticized them, and dismissed them. One of the Hindu mandali, who had been told by Upasni Maharaj to follow Baba, became disheartened and told him that he was going to leave. And none of the mandali could dissuade him from doing that. Baba also gave him every chance, but he decided he has to leave. He's had enough for now. And he went back to Pune. Baba told the other mandali very frankly, this is your chance now. If you can't stay, just leave. But they all stayed put. He warned them, you have to stick to me through thick and thin. Don't forget it. Baba came out of that first Jopti seclusion on the 15th, but he wanted to go back into seclusion soon. However, Upasni Maharaj's birthday was also to be celebrated within a few days. The issue was that he had to greet people, yet still stay in seclusion. So to accomplish this, he had Padri make a screen door for the front of the Jopti. So he could be in seclusion inside, but he could still speak to people through the door. One day, Baba was in a mood to play a game of hide and seek with the men. So he told them, look, they were around the Jopti. He said, I'm going to stay in this area. We're going to play hide and seek. You all go to the post office. Masaji is going to see that I'm hidden. And then when I'm hidden, he'll inform you all and you start looking. Now, I won't go to the village. I won't go up the hill. I'll stay in this area. So they all did that. Masaji was the attendant, informed them, and they started looking. They looked here and looked there, and nobody could find Baba. In the well, anywhere. They couldn't find Baba. And somebody said, you know, Baba will say anything and he might do anything. So he did probably go up the hill. He sneaked away somewhere, we don't know. He didn't stay here, obviously. They told Masaji, we give up. So Masaji took them back to the Jopti. The door was locked. And he just unlocked the door and out came Baba. Baba said, yeah, you see, you looked here, but you used your minds. You didn't follow my words, you used your minds. You saw the lock and you used your minds. You didn't follow my words. It's the same way with God. God is within you, but you look outside everywhere, everywhere except where God is. Remember, you can only find me within. Baba went back into the Jopti for seclusion on the 18th, fasting but not keeping silence. The mandali focused on preparing Meherabad for Upasni Maharaj's birthday celebration, which would happen on the 20th. That day, Nervous went to Ahmednagar to bring the necessary supplies that were required to continue preparing. And while he was there, Kansip Kaikushru spoke rudely to him. It was his nature. Nervous returned to Meherabad. Baba, in his casual, yet totally thorough way, extracted the story from Nervous. Baba immediately called Adi and told him that he was really disappointed with his family. He told him, any ill treatment of my mandali is an insult to me. Baba told him, go back to Ahmednagar, ask your father why he behaved so rudely, and you tell your brother Rustam, I don't want him to come here anymore. So Adi was heading to Ahmednagar, but on the way, he ran into his brother Rustam. And Rustam persuaded him, come on, we have to speak to Baba. Go to Baba and please ask him to allow me to speak to him. They did, and Baba did assent to speaking with Rustam. And after conversation, again, Rustam agreed to a fresh commitment to carefully follow Baba's order, regardless of what his father says. Baba had promised Daulat Mai Mera's mother that if he ever opened an ashram and included women, she would be amongst the first that he would call. She should stay ready. And that, in the form of a telegram, was sent to them, the invitation for Upasni Maharaj's birthday and to stay at Meherabad. So on May 19th, Daulat Mai and Mera came to stay at Meherabad. This is exactly 1 year after Mera first bowed down to Baba at the post office. 1 year to the day. She came to stay at Meherabad, and they were placed in the bathing room. Baba's aunt, Shireen Mai's eldest sister, Daula Masi, was already there with a few other women. So this became then the women disciples' quarters, the bathing room. P.P.C. Maharaj's birthday was celebrated on the 20th, and any guests and visitors arrived, they would stay there in the mess quarters. Baba stayed in seclusion in the Jopti, but he would give personal interviews to anybody who wanted an interview from behind the screen door. After lunch at 1 o'clock, everybody gathered in front of the Jopti for the music program. The day went on nicely. At sunset, there was a traditional Hindu birthday ceremony where they have a cradle and they put P.P.C. Maharaj's photograph in there and rocked it as the Kirtanwala told about the life of Maharaj. Just as he began, a huge wind came up, blowing thunder and lightning, and he couldn't say a thing. Baba said, quickly distribute prasad before it begins to rain. And as it started to rain, the prasad was still going on. Baba told everybody to rush to the mess quarters, have your supper, and after the rain, we'll reconvene. So they came back that night, and they reconvened in front of the Jopti till about midnight. Because it was a long night, Baba allowed the men to forego the 2 hours of prayer the next morning. And that day, most of the guests left, except for Mera, Daulat Mai, and Daulamasi. After 5 days of seclusion, Baba came out of the Jopti on the 23rd and called all the men staying with him who had dedicated their lives, and he asked each of them to take a serious oath to stick to him. That day, Dr. Gandhi, one of Baba's childhood friends and now a disciple, and another early Muslim disciple, Abdul Tayyib, arrived. Abdul Tayyib had a car, and while he was there, he offered his car for Baba's use. Now that day, Rustam came and asked Baba, on behalf of his father, permission for Adi to attend the wedding of their cousin, Sarosha's sister, Mota. She got married to a guy named Keki Irani, who was one of the first photographers of Baba. Took that beautiful series of Baba at Ghat Kopar in October 1923. Now the issue was this, not only was Adi with Baba as one of the resident mandali, they all had that order not to shave. Baba had given them an order when they came that period not to shave. It was to save time, trouble, but it was also an exercise in not being concerned about personal image, which for young men, it was kind of a thing. All of that was what Baba wanted. So Rustam asked, Adi should come to the wedding. No, he should look decent, Baba. Couldn't he shave? Reluctantly agreed to that. Oh, one more thing, Baba. You know, my in-laws, my mother-in-law is here now, my sister-in-law, Mera and Daulat Mai. Shouldn't they be allowed to attend too? Baba had a good idea. Okay, they can attend, but no fancy dress. Now, the order for the early women from that year earlier was anybody staying with him had to wear matubanu, which is an old Irani dress, a white scarf, a white simple cotton blouse with sleeves down to here, and a simple cotton sari. So they looked like old peasants. I would love to see if there was a photograph. Now, I asked their daughter, do you know if a photograph of the wedding exists? She's a Baba lover, her name is Parosha. She said she never saw a photograph. Although her father was a photographer, she never saw a photograph of the wedding. I would love to see if there was a photograph of that wedding with Mera and her mother there. What a treasure that would be. That happened that evening. At 10:30, Adi and the women returned. The women went back to the bathing room. Adi was called before Baba. Baba was worked up and irritated. You messed up the whole program here. You go against my wish just to do this. Adi just sat there quietly and took it all, even though Baba said, what's the point of you being here? You might as well go back home. Live any way you like. Just go back home and live. Why do you want to be here? Eventually, Baba cooled down and allowed Adi to stay, but the family giving more importance to social convention than his wish irked Baba. This is not Gulmai. Gulmai was always the one to go 100% for the masters. She didn't care for any of this. She's the one who suffered the most through all these years. But Kansab, he was a worldly man, and he was stuck in between. He didn't know this perfect master business. Just the same, his father was a real spiritual seeker. And they were affiliated with Gilori Shah and a perfect one in Ahmednagar named Bapu Sahib. So although the Zoroastrians didn't have a spiritual heritage per se, this family had a deep spiritual connection. The next day, Baba's mood was even more disturbed, and the dominant topic of conversation was whether they should continue staying on the property, considering Kansab's recent attitude about things. Kansab liked Baba, but again, this whole business of masters and all that was foreign to their traditions. Sarosha's father was also named Kaikushru, and he was married to Kansab Kaikushru's sister. And her name was Gulnar, to make things more confusing. So there's Kaikushru in Gulnar and Kaikushru in Gulmai. Sarosha's father was adamantly opposed to Baba. He also thought Baba was good when he first met him, but when this issue of masterhood and all that came up, their attitude was like, who the hell is this young man? Shariar's son? So? He calls himself this and that? We don't have this thing, Sadhguru and all that. What is that business? I'm much older. He should be bowing down to me, paying me respect. Now Baba, his point of view is that here he is, God in human form, come to do the work that only he can do, and he has a limited time to do that work. He doesn't have time to wait for all of these people to get over their cultural and religious prejudices against him. So he is very direct, to the point, not wasting time. And who is at the forefront of this? His circle people, the first circle. Step up to the line. Face it. They had to do it. So that next day, Rustam comes out with Gulmai. And when he arrives, Baba has spent the whole day criticizing Adi, the family. They're the people who gave him this property. He's criticizing them. This is an intense atmosphere. And when Rustam arrived, Baba directed his complaints to them. Now, from the very morning that day, Rustam was deluged with these complaints in the forms of a word and notes passed constantly Baba's complaint against him. When Rustam arrived, Baba started with him, and Rustam had just had enough. And he just blurted out something rude to Baba. Baba was really insulted and said, better I leave this place. I'm going away. You have what you like. I'm going away. He walked to Abdul Tayyib's car and got inside. And Abdul Tayyib was ready to drive. And the mandali had that order, wherever he goes, we follow. So they all piled onto this car, into and onto, and the car, the springs were just like that, and all these men were hanging there, and Baba's going to leave. Seeing this, the women and even some of the men start weeping. Baba's leaving. They rush to the car. Please, Baba, please stay. We're sorry. Whatever we did, we're sorry. Please, please. And Abdul Tayyib is watching Baba, and Baba and he goes to start the car. It wasn't a key, it was one of these. Start the car. And then even Gulmai starts to weep, who's been so stoic, she feels. That's it. Baba's leaving. Seeing that, even Rustam begs Baba's forgiveness. Please, Baba, stay. Very intense atmosphere. Went on for some time. Baba's telling them, I'm not obligated to anybody for any use of any property. But ultimately, he relents. He gets down from the car. And referring to Gulmai, he says, it's only because of Mother that I'm staying. Finally, Bob agreed to stay under 3 conditions. 1, Adi should no longer stay with him. He won't stay with the family. 2, Rustam, Konseb, and no one else from their family should come to Meherabad. And 3, the Meherabad land should be legally transferred into the name of either Adi or Gustaji. The serious atmosphere continued the next day. Rustam returned in the afternoon with the news that his father was hesitant about transferring the property. And he told Baba what his father's comment was. Does Baba consider me to be so faithless that he does not trust me to hold the ownership of the property? For a frank person, that's not a big insult. But in response, Baba said, see, it's better we find somewhere else to live. We can do orchard work in a better place than this. We'll just go elsewhere. At that, Adi was there and got excited and said, you are just looking for any excuse to leave this place. If you think the property is unsuitable, why did you agree to make this your permanent camp in the first place? Gustaji got irritated because Adi was speaking like this to Baba and started arguing with Adi. Adi raised his voice further. They went on a little bit. Baba told Adi, keep quiet now. That's enough. Don't raise your voice. Adi was lost in his rage and went on. Baba gave Adi a hard slap across the face. Adi was stunned and he began to sob. Baba consoled Adi. After a while, Adi pleaded with Baba, please don't leave here. Forgive us our mistakes and make Meherabad your headquarters. Baba sent Rustam to Ahmednagar to talk with his father again. And a little while later, Ramjoo, who had some legal sense, followed to help Rustam persuade his father. They both returned with a written note from Konseb. I am most willing to act as Meher Baba requests regarding the property. I ask his forgiveness for some misunderstanding when I first replied to his request. By evening, it was decided that Meherabad would be Baba's permanent base. To change the mood that was so dominant the previous days, the next day, Baba took 13 of the men on a trip to the Ellora Caves. Somewhere along the way, Baba asked the men if they're really interested in continuing the tour. He said, I still feel depressed about all this that's going on. We should just return to Meherabad. What do you say? The men said, well, Baba, some of the men, you know, we've never seen Ellora, so we'd like, since we've come this far, we'd kind of like to see it. Okay. And from that moment, they had 2 vehicles. Constant punctures, stuck in the mud, engine trouble, mechanical breakdowns. For a day and a half, they struggled to get back to Meherabad. They finally got back, filthy, full of mud and exhausted, with a good lesson. Take a hint from the master. But Baba's restlessness continued. The next day, he proposed that they might go to Kashmir. Other places were discussed. But it was after this theme, the orchard work, this orchard. There's probably some deeper meaning. Anybody can speculate. Some were in favor of the change, some were not. When Rustam arrived, he was obviously depressed that now Baba, who said he was going to make Meherabad his place, was talking again about going. Seeing his depression, Baba said, who else of you men, how many of you are depressed in my company? Tell me honestly. And many said, Baba, I'm kind of depressed. Bob advised them again, if you feel too tired, you better give up and go home. But none of them did. The discussion about traveling continued the next day. Now it's May 30th. But Quetta became the favored destination. They had visited Quetta the year before. Exactly a year before. So Baba said, okay, let's think of Quetta. Send a telegram to Rusi Pop. Rusi was the father of Boher and Katie. and tell him, look for some unoccupied property that we might be able to get. Now, when Baba was in seclusion, he had teased Rustam a few times about using his new car because he knew how attached Rustam was to his new car. You know, Rustam was the son of Kansab and Gulmai that Baba said he would keep in the world while he would take Adi in with him. He began to have a very successful business in the 20s, Sarosh Motor Works. Sarosh was the name of Kansab's father, who was that very fine, spiritually inclined person. So now he told Rustam, after teasing him, he told him, I'd like to take your car to drive way up north. And now he told Rustam, keep your car ready. We're going to leave. You aren't coming, but we're going to take your car. To taunt him a little bit. And so the plan was that they'd have a few drivers. Sarosh was going to be one of those drivers. Remember, at this time, the only Baba lovers in Ahmednagar were Adi's family and their cousin Sarosh. None of his siblings. Not even Sarosh's mother. They were all so pressured by the traditional Zoroastrian culture there that they had nothing to do with Baba. Only these people who had the guts to do it. Even the Satta family, that is Erj's mother's family, weren't in the picture yet. This is the year they first met Baba. This is the year that Nashawan Mama first met Baba at Meherabad. The following year they were dedicated to Baba. But not yet. So there were only these few people feeling alone with Baba as their master in Ahmednagar. Sarosh also came to Meherabad that day, and the plan was that he would be one of the drivers. And Sarosh sheepishly told Baba, Baba, after our trip to Ellora, my father was pretty angry, and no way in hell is he going to allow me to go on a trip with you. I can't, I'm sorry. Sarosh was also a man of the world with Rustam. They were Baba's disciples, but they were under the dictates of their fathers, to some degree. More so Sarosh. Sarosh's father was known as Kaikushu Elder. He was about 9 years older than Adi's father. And he also had more established business when they began and had more money, so he had more influence worldly over the family. So Baba was now upset, and the discussion went on. And at some point in the meeting, Baba informed them of the latest development, and he asked the opinion of the men staying with him. In the face of all of this that's been going on, this constant antagonism by these people, should we continue staying here? And at that point, there was a unanimous nay from the men. And it was settled. So the next 2 days were spent making arrangements for the new plan. And Baba and most of the mandali left Meherabad in the morning of June 2nd for Bombay. Baba ordered Padri and Nervous to take the horse named Sufi and the ox named Saint to present as gifts to Upasi Maharaj, now that Meherabad was being disbanded. So they had to take these animals to the train station in Ahmednagar, walking 5 miles, get them on the train, near Sakuri, get off, walk the remaining 9 miles to Sakuri. The problem was, these were not docile animals. And because they were special, they couldn't be whipped or hit, and they couldn't be ridden. They'd be carefully led. They got to Sakuri late at night. Upasi Maharaj was in a rotten mood. And he was not interested in all this. But anyway, it was late and he allowed them to stay the night. The next morning, they thought maybe he's cooled down. They carefully took their time and went to approach him again. Finally, Maharaj, these gifts were being sent. Call the police! Arrest these two men! These are thieves. They've stolen these animals and they're trying to pass them off on me. They realized it was hopeless. They took the animals, retreated their steps. 9 miles walking to the train, on the train. They got back. This time they only had to deliver them about a mile to Rustam, and they were done. But in the process, there was a problem, Padri said. these animals had a bad habit. He had the horse. He led the way with the horse, and the horse had a bad habit of walking up behind you, mischievously biting you when you weren't looking. Constantly he was being bit. I don't know if any of you have had the experience, but horses like to bite you right behind the kidney. Really hurts like hell. Padre was being bitten all along the way. And this ox had a bad habit of kicking. And somewhere along the line, Nervous got a nasty kick to his knee. It was a serious wound. Anyway, they got back to Bombay. Baba said, how did it go with Meherabad? They explained the whole story about it. Oh, okay, never mind. You followed my order, that's the important thing. It was during that period in Bombay where Mera told the story. She once peeked in the room and saw Adi massaging Baba's feet. And she thought, how fortunate. He must be a great disciple. And it was true. Baba was very appreciative of the way Adi had passed through that trial. Very difficult. They all left for Quetta within a few days. And because Nervous had been kicked, his immunity had become affected. He gradually became weaker with the strain of the journey and all that. And by the end of the month, he had developed typhoid. Baba had the mandali take very special care of him and said, don't worry about him. Whatever happens, he'll be fine. Baba left. And within a day or two, Nervous died there in Quetta. He was buried in the cemetery there. His grave is there. His passing represented the end of that first phase from the time they came to Meherabad in 1923 till the end of the Gamela Yoga phase. Very difficult. And what I told you tonight is not written thoroughly like this. It was too poignant a story. I never heard it spoken of when Mera was alive. These details come from a few of the men who were there. That first line of trial by fire, which people who came during the subsequent years very rarely had to experience. Nervous was the one who was directed by Baba to paint the name Meherabad on a sign which was planted between the post office and the railway track at the end of their first stay. His death represented the end of that period of work in much the same way that the deaths of Arjun Supekar as the illiterate director of education and Dr. Karkal, who was the doctor at Meher Free Hospital and Dispensary, both died within days of each other in that short period of a month that Baba stayed away between the first long stay and the second long stay of Meherabad. Any questions? Yes, Jane.
The bathing room, is that standing now?
When Baba disbanded Meherabad again in 1928 to go to Quetta because the boys were removed from the Prem Ashram, he reestablished everything in Toka. And what happened then is that everything was dismantled that could be moved from Meherabad and taken to Toka. Even the bathing room was dismantled. It was made with mud mortar, but it had good old bricks. If you want to see it today, go to Toka and see Baba's cabin there.
This building.
It's there. That's what happened to those bricks.
Is that on the way when you go to Laura, the confluence there?
Yes. Godavari River is right there. It's just near the bridge. It's totally changed from what it used to be in our old days, but it's still there. Yes?
I'm wondering, he was not from a rich family. How did he travel around the world without having that much money? Where did the money,
Okay, good question.
At that time, it was very expensive.
Yes. Baba took money from maybe half a dozen people, mostly in his life. Although, when it came to his basic lovers, he would say 5 rupees, 1 rupee, like that. He would make them give. Buy a book. I want you to buy a book while you're here. A 1 rupee booklet, something. But he wanted to engage all of them and make them feel that they were part of his effort. However, what you're asking is, where did the bulk of this money come from? You know that very famous photograph of Baba in Ahmednagar sitting on the chair with the kerchief on his head? That was taken on January 11th, 1927. The day after that, they traveled to Pune, and Mera and her mother signed over the complete balance of their wealth to Baba, which was a lot. This is how Baba funded the Meher and Prem Ashram. And he also, in the name of Mera's father, Jahangir, started a school for poor Zoroastrian boys in Iran. But it was also how Baba made his first couple trips to the West. Now, how did he do the first period? Khorshid's father, who was a jeweler, had given over so much of his wealth to Baba. Most of his wealth was taken by his family when he was kidnapped. That's another story. I've done a video about the story of Kaikushu Masa, another Kaikushu Masa, who was married to Suna, the sister of Gulmai. They were the parents of Khorshid, who was one of the close women disciples of Baba, who was also there during this early period. Through the years, then, when Baba came to the West, immediately his close disciples were drawn to him. Elizabeth Patterson, Narina Machabelli, they were both millionaires. Baba did not take as much from them as he could have. Elizabeth Patterson gave everything. But Baba did not want to take everything. Took a lot. Out of all the Western disciples, nobody has done more for Baba than her. The center. She gave the center.
Yeah, the mother paid for their second trip to the U.S.
Yes. Yes.
And then from England to here, it was Watson.
Thomas Watson. So early lovers were inspired to help Baba, and they usually didn't have a problem with that. At the same time, Baba would tell the mandali in India, at the time, the world was in deep depression. He allowed his father to lose his business completely. He could have saved him. Baba could have intervened and saved his father in that court case. His father was swindled. He lost everything. And his father, being a spiritually minded person, it's between you and God. I've forgiven you. What he said to the man who swindled him. Baba, in the meantime, told his mandali at that time, personally, I have nothing. I can't guarantee that maybe you can scrape up some rice and dal if you stay here. At the same time, they knew whatever he said, you can't go anywhere. You're done. This was not an easy life. The average person has a mentality, what do I want next? Hey, I think I'll go over there. Oh, yeah, I'll do this. I feel like, hey, this will be fun. This is outside the realm of their minds. This is not there. Their mind was, what does he want next? Don't do this. He might not like that. Just do this. What does he want next? What can we do to please him? Very rare state of mind. It's not for everybody. Only people who have had long past preparation can live those lives. Yes?
Peter, what was the dream that Mera had about the White Horse before meeting Baba? Do you remember that?
I'll say this. There was the experience when she went to Babajan. That what you're speaking of?
Yeah.
She went to Babajan with a school friend of hers, and Mera was a little bit shy, but Babajan would pick these people out. And the girl, whatever she wanted, but she picked up Mera. You will have a beautiful white horse. Mera did get the white horse, but later she realized Babajan was speaking of Baba. When Khorshid's mother, Gulmai's sister Suna, first met Babajan, Babajan got up and greeted her like an old long-lost friend. Where have you been? Oh, I've been waiting so long to see you. These people they're not ordinary. The mandali would say, we were ordinary people, or they weren't ordinary in that sense. They were extraordinarily ordinary. Yes. Yes.
You made a distinction earlier between a kurta and a sadra.
Kurta is that shirt. Usually collarless shirt, long. Sadra is a Zoroastrian thing, which has specific features to it, but the long sadra was unique to Baba. something that Gulmai had designed for him. Yeah. Yes?
One more question.
Just tell us again, who was the first person to create the flag?
You mean sew the flag? Dina Talati, who is also a close early disciple of Baba's. She married Naval Talati. They were engaged by Upasana Maharaj. And because you brought it up, I'm going to say an interesting thing. This is how Baba provoked these Orthodox people. They got married about a month before Rustam and Freni. When Rustam and Freni got married, they were given gifts of money. When all these gifts of money were collected, Baba said openly, now, you give it to Naval and Dina, the airport. So all the money that was given to Rustam and Freni for their wedding was given to Naval and Dina. And of course, they happily agreed to do that. What about all the family who was not interested in Meherabad? It was just one more way of just getting them to react, because Baba wanted opposition. He needed that opposition, thrived on that. But he had the infinite knowledge and strength to know what the purpose of it was. He integrated that opposition to fuel his work. Very difficult life. Okay?
Okay.
Bye.